My name is Spero Alexio, and I'm here today to talk about chocolate cake. Now, I'm sorry, did you think I was going to talk about ibogaine and integration and what to do? Well, we will get to that, but first, I want to talk a little bit about chocolate cake. And more specifically, I want to talk about the ingredients for chocolate cake. If you search the recipe website, all recipes, you will get 8,552 chocolate cake recipes. And that's a lot of possibilities, right? So which one is right? Well, that depends on you. It depends on your interests, your tastes, and maybe even what you experienced growing up. If your grandmother liked to put bananas on a chocolate cake, that's normal for you. All right. So what's right for you as far as this recipe? It depends on the person and what resonates with them. Okay, so today I will answer the question, what are the best ingredients for ibogaine aftercare? It's also called continued care. It's what happens after somebody detoxes with ibogaine. And I don't think I need to talk about what ibogaine is and how it works. You have other people who are available for that. But as for these ingredients, these magical ingredients, how do you find them? How do you combine them, right? And, or should I say, how do you integrate them into your life? Okay. Now, during the talk, I'll be mentioning some core principles. This first one is what works best after ibogaine is what works best for the individual. And this is entering the realm of highly personalized treatment. Andrew Tatarsky in New York calls it radically personalized treatment. I like that. And that's what I do. So we'll get back to those ingredients in a minute. But let me tell you a little bit about myself, and that will help sort of inform you as to the type of treatment I ended up doing in my practice, okay? My first profession, I was a restaurateur. I worked in fine dining, and by the time I hit my mid-30s, I realized I wanted to do something different. So I've been a clinically trained psychotherapist for the last 25 years. And I have a counseling practice. It's all virtual now, and it's based in Las Vegas, Nevada. So in this second career, for many years, I was doing non-traditional psychotherapy for addictive issues, right? Addictions. In the beginning, my area of expertise was relapse prevention because Terry Gorski was my mentor in the field, and his name is synonymous with relapse prevention, along with Alan Marlott. So I was very familiar with chronic relapse patterns, and I tended to get clients who didn't fit in. I don't want to call them misfits, but they didn't fit in the 12-step approach. And at that time, 25 years ago, there were no therapists who were that I knew of who were working with people who didn't want to go to 12-step programs for one reason or another. So kind of the motto back then was, when all else fails, send them to Spero, okay? And I also work with people in AA who had been sober for years, but then slipped or relapsed, and there was no way for them to restart their recovery by going to meetings because they were just told to take a chip or admit they're powerless. So those were kind of the two groups I worked with, right? Over the years, I expanded my practice, and 7 years ago, I started meeting people in Las Vegas who had gone to Mexico and detoxed with ibogaine. Okay. And I had no idea what ibogaine was, or I didn't know anything about ayahuasca or 5-MeO DMT. The only thing I knew was that Carlos Castaneda had talked about, what was it, peyote? And so I had a little understanding from reading, Journey to Ixtlan, some of his other books, which I enjoyed, but no personal experience. And since in the last 7 years, I've let's say experimented with a variety of hallucinogens, but this for me to get better, I had to use basically a wide variety of treatments and different approaches, because like the people I work with, the 12-step program didn't work for me. And so I started studying psychology, and I had no intention of helping anybody. I wanted to figure myself out, and I ended up being a pretty good student. So I got some advanced degrees in psychology and social work, but I also started studying addiction from different perspectives. And so I had what I call an intellectual awakening. It wasn't a spiritual awakening, but my intellect came alive, and I was a pretty good student. So in my practice, I employ a variety of psychological approaches, from cognitive behavioral to Jungian shadow work, relapse prevention, of course, which is what I learned in the beginning of my career. But I also bring in Roman Stoicism, Greek mythology, Native American folklore. So I have this. Let me put it to you this way. I look at the people who come to me as human beings who have addictive illness or addiction issues. I don't look at them as addicts who have human issues, okay? And by taking that perspective, seeing everybody as a human being first, it allows me to take all kinds of different aftercare approaches, different treatment modalities, because I'm not limited to drug treatment, right? And I'll talk a little later about Stoicism, and this is a philosophy 2,000 years ago. It wasn't designed for drug addicts in recovery, excuse the term, but it was designed for human beings. Okay, but I'll get on that in a little bit. So I have this diverse clinical background, and I'm not really wedded to any school of thought, right? Two things drive my aftercare approach. One is the idea that if you love somebody, care for them in that therapeutic environment, it can be a powerful aspect of treatment, and you let them know you love them and care about them in a lot of different ways. I don't tell my clients I love them, but I demonstrate it. And oftentimes there is some aspect of their lives where the ability to connect and love has been damaged. So that's one thing I keep in mind, is that love is this powerful force if I can try and transmit it, right? And the second part is creativity. Okay, so creativity is at the heart of what I do, and it's a collaborative effort with the client. I'm not doing therapy to them. I'm creating something with them, really a new narrative for their life. And And when you approach ibogaine aftercare this way, or any aftercare, it's very empowering. And the client feels like they really have a vested interest. All right. And they begin to see that they actually have their own answers. Right. And I think that's what turned me off to AA. It was 12 steps, and you do this, do that, do it the way I did it. Anyway. So as the person tells me about themselves and their lives, they're actually telling me what their treatment should be, but they don't realize it. Okay. So here's another core principle. Collaboration is one of the keys to successful aftercare. And you really have to allow the client to state his truth and his thinking, and allow him to be who he is in that moment. All right. It doesn't matter where I want him to go in his life. It matters where he wants or she wants to go. Okay. So just briefly, I was listening to the previous speaker who was talking about integration, and I asked a lot of people, what's integration? I got a variety of responses. And, I look at integration broadly as what you do after a psychedelic experience to change your life. Okay. Now, integration might involve taking some of the things you experienced in an ibogaine detox and trying to understand them. Often, if you have a vision, sometimes it's metaphoric, and for the people who do recall very vivid things from their ibogaine experience, that's great, and I really love to go through that and try and help them interpret it. But there are many people who do ibogaine. I usually work with opiate addicts, and they don't recall much of what happened. They sometimes they feel cheated. Like, how come I didn't talk to my dead grandfather? Well, because ibogaine had other plans for you. And one of the mystical aspects of ibogaine is it kind of gives the person what they need, or shows them what they need to see. And sometimes it's a kind of a stern presence, like called an iboga god. It reads the Mariah Act. Other people have very clear visions, and we call it the waking dream state. Okay, but whatever they come away from their ibogaine detox with, as they talk to you about their lives, they're actually kind of telling you what happened in that detox, even if they don't recall it. That's one of my theories. Anyway, so people often early in their ibogaine integration or early recovery after ibogaine, they have a sort of unrealistic view of where they are. They often think they're more evolved, and some people feels this tremendous connection to spirit and to other people and to people in their lives, and it's powerful because addiction is about disconnection. So they've had something fantastic that's happened. They don't quite know what it is, but they really haven't done anything yet. Okay, so I'm going to go over. We're going to go back to the recipe, and before we do, I'll say this about integration. It's a process. It's not an event. It doesn't have we're going to integrate what you experienced for 3 weeks, and then we're going to, it continues to evolve and unfold. And it might look different for different people. All right. So I should say something about, I take people after they've detoxed, but really it's part of a continuum. And it's for me, the best case scenario is I have a client, I'm working with them, and I try and see if they're a good candidate for ibogaine. And then I match them with an ibogaine provider. And I talk to that provider while they're doing the ibogaine treatment, and then I work with them again after they're finished with the treatment. So it's a whole continuum of care. And one of the other issues I've seen with people, and sometimes I don't get somebody until they're home for 2 weeks, and I get a call from a ibogaine provider. Hey, Spero, this guy did treatment with us 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he's not doing very well, but when I actually can help somebody go to a provider who I think is doing ethical, professional work, it makes my job so much easier. There's some providers, a lot of providers out there in Mexico and Canada, but if I send someone to the Avante Institute in the Bahamas, I know they're going to do a great job, and the person won't come home and still be detoxing. And Anselmo in Mexico is another guy who I trust, and if I send someone there, they will. The better providers alter their treatment based on how much, what the drug was, what are the person using, how long have they been using it, and it's not a cookie cutter 7-day ibogaine detox. Whatever you got, we'll give you the 7-day program. Fentanyl has been a game changer in the ibogaine world. Depending on what the issue is, what the substance use is, the better providers are very good about preparation and then keeping the person as long as they need to. Anyway, let me get back to the basic ingredients for ibogaine aftercare, and using my chocolate cake metaphor. There's some basic ingredients for chocolate cake, like chocolate and eggs, and flour, and then there's some unusual ingredients. So I'll start with some of the more traditional things that I think people should include or try to look at. So let's start with exercise. These are the more traditional things. Many people who experience an ibogaine detox start taking better care of themselves. Exercise is a natural antidepressant. So the brain releases endorphins and promotes a feeling of well-being. Exercise also helps the body absorb cortisol, which is the fight or flight hormone. And here's something else that's I find is kind of curious about people who have been using drugs for years. They in recovery, they tend not to be very perceptive of their stress levels. They might be aware when they're absolutely redlining, they're ready to call Flacco, their dealer, and at that moment, they've gone too far in the process. But that stress has probably been building over time. It's just they're not aware of it. They're not acknowledging it. So part of my work is to get people to recognize stress as it builds, what things are particularly stressful, and different people can handle different levels of stress. But exercise is a great way to sort of lower that stress that sometimes they're not even aware of. Okay, so another sort of traditional aftercare piece is nutrition, involves making healthy choices. I usually recommend sort of Mediterranean diet. Sugar is the main thing for me that most people sort of have to watch. Sugar is nasty, and it's in almost everything. So, so again, you don't have to be on a perfect diet, but start paying attention to what you eat, what you put in your body, because it will affect your recovery. Another important piece for is finding a support group, and I mean a support group of any kind. The more traditional, or it could be 12 steps. I've had clients that have done ibogaine and gone back to 12-step programs. I usually tell them, don't be talking about psychedelics in an AA meeting, and sometimes they listen to me and sometimes they don't. But there are now groups that are psychedelics and 12 steps. They're wedded together. And if you can find that, great. But a support group can be your church. It could be a bunch of guys you go golfing with. With one client I had, it was actually his family was his support group, because he didn't want to talk to other people, strangers. So the main thing is that it's a group of people you can rely on who have your best interests at heart. All right. And again, after ibogaine, a lot of people feel that desire to connect. All right. I guess I should mention another piece is finding a therapist, doing talk therapy. If you can find someone like me, or there's a number of us doing talk therapy for people who've used psychedelics. That's great. If not, you try and find a therapist who's open-minded, and every day more and more therapists are becoming hip to the fact that, you know, psychedelic assisted therapy is here to stay. So even a couple of years ago, it was much more difficult to find a therapist. But I'm a believer in talk therapy, of course, but only as part of the entire spectrum of tools. The last thing I'll say that's kind of on the traditional realm, and is the importance of a morning routine. Now, again, you won't see a whole lot of information in the recovery literature about morning rituals and morning routines. But again, I draw from anywhere and everywhere. And in the business world, there's tremendous literature on these executives who have a special routine in the morning. There's a book called Morning Miracle. And with most of my clients, I try and get them to look at how they start their day. You know, they don't have to do it like I do. I drink warm lemon juice with water, and then I have a organic vegetable drink, and then I have oatmeal. I mean, I have my own morning routine, and then I like to look at a fire in the morning. Whatever it is, though, you know, it usually involves a little bit of exercise, stretching, and as you make something, you know, you're developing new habits and new rituals, and in some ways, you're replacing those old rituals and habits. And I've always found that replacing a behavior is much more. It's easier than just denying yourself something. And so I really have my clients look at what their morning routine is, and study the routines of highly successful people, because they swear by the power of starting your day in a certain way. And I usually do a little meditation too. But again, everyone has to find what works for them. Actually, we're edging now into more non-traditional approaches to aftercare or continued care. I'm going to start with discovering your gifts. You know, what's special about you. And some people know it already. They know they love music or outdoors or travel. But a lot of people who've been using drugs for years are out of touch with their basically their soul and what resonates their soul. And the answer to that, what's special, what's unusual about you, it's not out there somewhere. It's usually you've experienced it earlier in your life. I guess I'll tell you about my gift, and it's not being a therapist. I'm pretty good at it, but that's not the thing that's special about me. I'm a writer, and I'll tell you the story. When I discovered I was a writer, and I was 12 years old, and my teacher at that time said to me, what'd you do during the summer? That was the assignment. Everyone came back from the summer, and most of the kids wrote about getting a dog or going to camp. But at that time, 12 years old, my friends used to call me Spero the hero, and just because it rhymed, right? So my mind starts percolating, and I started with that title, and I wrote a very different story about my summer vacation. I wrote a story about having a bomb-making transvestite living next door to me, and I found out that she was going to blow up the world with an atom bomb. And then in the story I wrote, now 12 years old, in the story I wrote, the police come to investigate my neighbor, and this is a man who's dressed as a woman, and I realized they're getting fooled. And so Spero the hero climbs up on the roof of my house, and I jump off and I land on this person, my neighbor. I pull off her wig or his wig, and then the police realize this is a dangerous person. And the last line of the story is, that's why they call me Spero the hero. Okay, so let me cut this short, but my parents got called into school, and the thing is, I wasn't upset about that. I was excited that I had put together a story that so upset the teacher. You had to call my parents in, right? My parents didn't know what to make of it, but they were academics, so they asked some of their friends, and the English professor told them, "There's nothing wrong with Spero. This kid can write. He's a creative kid." Okay, so I'm a writer who works as a therapist. Let me move off of that story. I'm sorry I took so long with that, but once you realize what it is, what's special about you, and most of the panel are activists. They care about others. We're all kind of in the same realm. Healers. When you identify what it is that you think is really your passion, it doesn't have to be your job. It could be something that you did when you were a young kid, like me. It might be a hobby or something you enjoyed before addiction took over. I sometimes ask my clients to remember what their interests were, 12, 13, 14, to access their interests. And it's a matter of uncovering really who you were before life beat you down. So it might be building model airplanes, a ballroom dancing, collecting tractor seats. I don't know. But the idea is to find something you really enjoy, it fully engages your interests, and something that you lose time. That's important, because addiction is a suspension of time, and people often go out on a binge and they say, where have I been? Or they're gone for years. And that interest, that thing that really resonates your soul, you've got it when you lose a sense of time and you're just completely engaged. All right. If we have time later, I'll tell you a case study of one of my clients, but I don't know if we'll have time for that. All right, here's another unusual piece. I call it exploring love, sex, and relationships. All right, and sexual behavior, or the concept of love, it's a critical part, in my opinion, of aftercare. And to do this effectively as a therapist, I had to work on my own relationships, sexual behavior, and understanding of love. Because, and I'm surprised at how many therapists shy away from this, but, intimacy disorders, where there's some kind of disruption in the connection with a mother or father, intimacy disorders are often underneath the substance use. Okay. And anyway, that's, again, if you feel like, well, I mean, how many times have somebody said that they got in a relationship and they couldn't handle it, they couldn't handle the emotions. And my thought on that is, get into relationships of all kinds, not just romantic relationships. Get into relationships with your family, with yourself, with your people at the supermarket. But I don't know where I was going with that. Let me give you another incredibly unusual but powerful piece that I used in aftercare treating people, and that's the philosophy of Stoicism. Now, this is a philosophy from almost 2,000 years ago, and it was not designed to help addicts or people in recovery. It was, the rulers of ancient Rome, like Marcus Aurelius, they had a philosophy of how to treat people, how to live. And a couple of years ago, at the beginning of the pandemic, I read an article about the pandemic in ancient Rome. I think it was called the entheogenic plague, and it lasted for 12 years. So all these famous Roman emperors and philosophers had to deal with a pandemic, and it was remarkable how similar what their experiences were to what I was experiencing. So eventually, I discovered there was a daily meditation called the Daily Stoic, and I started introducing my clients to this philosophy of Stoicism, and some of them took to it, and some of them didn't. But they liked the fact that it wasn't focused on not taking drugs. It was focused on living in difficult circumstances. I'll give you one other quick story. One of my clients is a former model from LA named Lola. Now, anytime I talk about somebody, I've changed some of the identifying characteristics, but at 27, she's a former model, and I don't work with a lot of women, but I just hit it off with Lola, and she's really very funny, and I knew immediately we would have a therapeutic connection, right? So I told her about Stoicism, and I didn't know if it would appeal to her, but there's a motto that the Stoics have called "Remember Death." Okay, and the idea is not to be morbid and walk around all day thinking you're going to die. It's to remember that life is a limited time opportunity. It's a limited time deal. So the Stoics would always say, "Remember death." Why? To live more passionately today. Now, again, this is a 27-year-old woman, Lola, and a lot of young people in her group of friends were overdosing in the last year or two. I mean, it was remarkable. Every 2 or 3 months, she'd tell me somebody else overdosed. So what did Lola hang on to? It's the Stoics' idea of Remember death. Remember that, you know, you're here for a reason. Your destiny is not to be a drug addict. That's not your destiny. What is your destiny? So I'm always surprised at who embraces some of these different treatments and who doesn't. All right, let's see what time it is here. 3:09. I think I'm gonna wrap this up. I'll say a couple of other things that maybe the therapists who are listening haven't heard before. One of the things I like to do is have my clients get in touch with their inner adult. A lot of people talk about inner child, and yes, it's important to look at, you know, especially if you've had trauma, recognize, you know, that child. Some people like to say that they can start their childhood over again. But I've seen that a lot of people who have detoxed with ibogaine, they're not sure how to be an adult, and they're kind of learning how to be an adult. And what I always say is that in your life, even if you've been using drugs for years, you've had examples of an adult in your life, and try and connect with that person, your inner adult, because it's there. You've had examples of adult. And anytime I say, you know, what would an adult do in that situation? You know, they can imagine it, and they can get in touch with it. So getting in touch with your inner adult, that's something I think unusual that I do. And I have to still get in touch with my inner adult sometimes. The last thing that I do that's unusual and it's non-traditional is I call it real-time psychotherapy. I'll have a session on, Wednesday at 3:00. I have a session with a client, but between that time and the next time we speak, I allow all my clients to get in touch with me. They could text me, maybe Sunday night at 8:00 at night. They need to talk to me. And my life is set up in a way I don't have a huge practice. I keep my practice small. I'm usually available within an hour or two, and so I encourage them to recognize when they're stressed, recognize when their thinking is going off, and contact me. Don't wait until the next appointment. Okay. And I call that real-time psychotherapy. Well, where did I get that idea? Well, 30-something years ago, I was going to AA meetings, and one of the guys said, "Spero, you can call me anytime." And I was like, come on, you married it. No, anytime. And he meant it. Now, again, I'm not an AA member. I haven't gone to meetings in years, but everything I've experienced in my entire life, I use if I can. And I love the idea of being available and sort of helping my clients recognize when they're in trouble, basically. When are they in an emotional when are they redlining their stress? Excuse me. And I had to recognize that earlier today. I was running behind. I was feeling stressed, and Lakshmi was kind enough to move my presentation. Why? Because I realized, man, I need to slow down. I need to gather my thoughts. And, okay. So, I've talked a lot about finding this recipe, right? Finding out what's going to work for you or what's going to work for your client if you're a therapist. But I would say with all my heart that if you get that recipe right, if you figure out what your passion is and what you need to do in your life, you get your ibogaine aftercare recipe correct. Your recovery will be delicious. That's all I have to say. Thank you. What is a good cake?